Hello, everyone. My name is Lina Yaku. I'm the Global Director for Engagement and Knowledge for the Resilient Cities Network, and I will moderate this discussion today. This is a discussion hosted by the Water Action Track of the Global Commission on Adaptation and co-organized by Deltares and the Resilient Cities Network. The overall aim of this session is to get a deeper understanding of how cities are strengthening their water systems and build their resilience, and discuss how global collaboration among cities and partners can further accelerate and climate-proof our cities in the years to come. We have 90 minutes ahead of us, and we have a great panel of speakers. The session is structured in mainly two parts. One, we will hear directly from Cape Town, Kigali, Miami, and Surat. While during the second part, we will discuss with Deltares, the Resilient Cities Network, and the Global Center on Adaptation, how we can build a more global collaboration and community to support this work. But before we start with the first panel, I would like to give the floor to Henk Ovink, Special Envoy for International Water Affairs for the Kingdom of the Netherlands, to set the stage and tell us a bit more about the overall objectives of the Water Action Track and why this discussion about cities is important. After Henk, I will give the floor to Yasmina Van Drieu, Program Officer for Water for the GCA, to introduce us the Water Adaptation Hub specifically. So without further delay, Henk, thank you for joining.
Thank you, Lina. And thank you also very much, Global Resilient Cities Network, Deltares, and the Global Center on Adaptation for organizing this webinar and this panel. In my role as Special Envoy, I, of course, focus a lot on water in the context of climate vulnerability. And the hotspots of these vulnerabilities are, of course, our cities. It is where our challenges meet. This is where all sustainable development goals intersect. Environmental, cultural, social, and economic. And it's only by making those connections that we can provoke answers that really solve future problems, that we can prepare ourselves, become more resilient and more sustainable for that future. And that can only happen by inclusion, partnerships, and collaboration. Coming off the ground in these communities, matching experts with cultural knowledge, building partnerships in our institutions, enabling an environment that goes across a local, community-driven approach all the way to the institutions we need. That is also at the heart and core of the Global Resilient Cities Network. This is what you've been doing over the last years, but moreover, capacitating cities around the world, you make the connections across these cities. And I think this is the real value add, also from my role as a special envoy, and my role as chairing the Water Action Track for the Global Commission on Adaptation is not only can we identify the right levels of interventions, not only can we share the knowledge and build capacity, but can we replicate, can we bring it to scale? And I'll end with these last remarks, but what we see around the world, also in the context of the recovery efforts, is many great ideas, many good examples, and a lot of partners stepping up. But if we compare it to the massive amount of investments that still go to the ones that make us more vulnerable, the infrastructure that putting us backwards, the projects of the past, the inspiration is just a sliver, a drop on a hot plate. So scale and replication through partnerships and inspiration is of critical importance. And water plays a critical role because if you invest in water, you have a trickle-down effect across all challenges in society with better health, more equality, better economic opportunity, and of course, more climate resiliency. So thanks so much for organizing this. I really look forward to the debate. Thanks partners, Deltares, the Global Resilient Cities Network, and of course, the Global Center on Adaptation. And of course, Lina, in your role, thanks for being such a good partner. And Yasmina will tell more about what we do with the Water Action Track and how we want to partner with you to bring us all together to ensure that that scale is actually happening. So Good luck.
Thank you, Hank. Yasmina, tell us about the Water Adaptation Hub and what this is all about.
Yes, thank you, Lena, and everyone for giving me the floor and the opportunity to give a bit of, give an introduction actually to the Water Adaptation Hub. I'm just trying to start the slideshow. Yes, you should see it now. Yeah, so the Water Adaptation Hub, and maybe I would like to start by mentioning that this really is a joint initiative of the partners of the Water Action Track, and those partners are the Ministry of Infrastructure and Water Management of the Netherlands, the Global Center on Adaptation, the World Resources Institute, and the World Bank. And the hub is hosted by the Global Center on Adaptation. So maybe to start with, what can the Water Adaptation Hub really mean for you? What can it do for you? Well, really, it's an open and inclusive platform and tool for learning and sharing amongst peer practitioners to really get knowledge exchange and experience exchange across the globe going, and really to play a role by connecting these different networks, initiatives, communities of practice, groups to accelerate and scale up. Also what Henk mentioned, to really accelerate that water adaptation or water in adaptation, because otherwise we're not going to reach 2030, the SDGs, because climate change is here. And another important element that I want to emphasize is that the Water Action Track and its partners really see that these water and climate spheres are still very much disconnected. And to really get water higher on the climate agenda, we need to really connect those further. So that's another element of the Water Adaptation Hub that really wants to push that, to put water higher on the climate agenda. And a bit more concretely towards cities, what could the water adaptation, or what will it do to support cities? Well, really also help them to get a better understanding of the impacts and risks of climate change. To give you an example, we're working also with the C40 Cities Network that have a rapid risk assessment, and we are now testing that in Accra together with our partners, Deltares and AMA, obviously. And this really enables, testing this and refining it to, with the experience we have, and then using that in a wider cities network. So those are some of the things that the Water Adaptation Hub could support cities with, really to build and expand these partnerships for scale and impact because of the different entities connected and the different partners. And again, really emphasizing also that this link with national and international water and climate dialogues is important also in the sphere of cities. And maybe a bit more concretely on how the Water Adaptation Hub works. Well, a key element is an active and engaged facilitator, which we will have starting early next year, hopefully. And in the interim, I'm taking on that role. And this facilitator really will actively broker between the initiatives and also try to get information and insights, challenges consolidated so that he or she can bring that to these international and national climate dialogues and increase the attention to water, but also really broker between initiatives and thereby reach scale and that acceleration that we need. And a key element, obviously, are and sort of the backbone of the hub are the groups and the communities of practice and the networks that are working on water adaptation worldwide. And I want to keep it short because I think I only have 3 minutes. So I would like to really challenge you also to think about this a bit more and reflect on it and really think about how you would like to engage with the Water Adaptation Hub, or what you would need from it, what the Water Adaptation Hub could do for you, but also the other way around, what you could do for the hub. So feel free to connect to me and contact me. And I look forward to connecting a community on city adaptation to the hub in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Yasmin. And this was just very useful background. We also want to make this session as interactive as possible. So please feel free to add any questions or comments throughout the duration of the session at the Q&A box. and I will address as many as possible. We have more than 150 people registered for the event, and I think more than 80 currently online. So I would urge you to introduce yourselves using the chat box to get also better understanding of who is with us today, who is with us in our virtual room. So quickly, and based on what Henk and Yasmina kind of framed, I want to move into our first panel that will focus specifically on the city experiences in building urban water resilience. We have here today with us Gareth Morgan, Director for Resilience at the City of Cape Town, Jafed Habinsuti, Chief Resilience Officer at the City of Kigali. Both they will talk about their experience in using the city water resilience approach in their cities respectively. Then we will move on to Claire Jochen, a Senior Consultant and Researcher for Nature-Based Solutions at Deltares. She's based in the US, in Florida, if I'm not wrong. And she will focus on how we implement innovative resilience and adaptation planning solutions with a focus for US cities. And finally, we will hear from Kamlesh Yagnik, Chief Resilience Officer at the City of Surat. Kamlesh will discuss how the collaboration between Surat and Rotterdam helped the city in solving its water challenges. So I will start with Gareth and Jaffrey. Gareth, do you want to start and talk about Cape Town?
Hello, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be with you here today to find out more about this incredible partnership going forward. I have the privilege of leading the newish resilience program in the city of Cape Town, approximately 3.5 years old. And we cut our teeth in the extreme drought event in Cape Town from 2015 to 2018, which was at its most dangerous in the late stages of 2017 and early stages of 2018. At that time, resilience was not a word that was heavily used in the city government. That's not to say there weren't a number of projects and programs that had the characteristics of resilience, but we had to bring into the discourse and into the planning the principles of resilience. What's interesting today, as we are 9 months or so into the COVID-19 pandemic in the city of Cape Town, is that nobody has any doubt about what resilience means, both in theory and in practice in the city of Cape Town. And that's because, in fact, many of the lessons from the drought are now being used across a range of other big city challenges. And this year, of course, has been all about responding to the pandemic. What's interesting, in fact, is that the core team that worked on the drought response in 2017, 2018, actually was the core team that worked on the pandemic response for our city government in 2020 and will in 2021. So there's something interesting about the capability of resilience practitioners to work across different fields. But back to the water challenges of Cape Town. As I said, we went through that extreme drought. We came close to running out of drinking water in Cape Town. And there are a number of reasons why that didn't happen. Mostly our 4.3 million citizens, as well as our businesses, managed to curtail their water usage by 50% in a very, very short period of time. And so we were able to avert what came to be known as day zero. There were, of course, a number of other actions. And Cape Town was able to show that it had many of the characteristics of resilience. We are always a bit nervous to say that we are a resilient city. We think that resilience is constantly moving, but I think it would be fair to say that we have shown a lot of resilience capabilities. Like the pandemic is now being spoken about as this great disruptor and an opportunity to learn and transform, we used the drought in Cape Town as an opportunity to learn and transform as well. So Cape Town today has a new, highly progressive water strategy, and we also, of course, have the resilience strategy, which I am the custodian of. One of the tools that we used was the City Water Resilience Framework and Approach. And in the chat box, I've dropped that document in if anyone wants to have a look. That's the Cape Town Water Resilience Profile, which was the outcome of that particular tool. And it's a good time as well to thank the various developers of the tool that worked with Cape Town at that time, including the Resilience Shift, ARIP, 100 Resilient Cities at the time, the World Bank, to name but a few. What's interesting about that particular tool is it was actually developed with about 5 or 6 different cities around the world, including Cape Town, at the time of our extreme drought. And so we had a very engaged populace and business sector and academic sector, and as a city we were able to contribute to the development of it. But we also had the great privilege of being the first city in the world to deploy the tool and to actually get its practical benefits. And the document I've shared will give viewers an opportunity to see what it is. So it is a tool which allows you to work with your own water stakeholders, whether it be from civil society, government, academia, or business, which indeed we did. It's a great tool to convene water stakeholders, to do a rigorous assessment, which can be done both qualitatively and quantitatively, in order to work out areas of relative strength and areas of relative weakness. What's interesting is we obviously spoke about during the drought about water resilience really just being about avoiding the worst impacts of a drought. But the water resilience framework and approach has allowed us to take a much broader view of water resilience, incorporating as well leadership and strategy, the natural environment, healthy urban spaces, disaster recovery and response. All of those things in a city like Cape Town, of course, have responses. But from the resilience assessment, we now know where those relative strengths and relative weaknesses are. So from the drought, we are committing now to 300 megalitres a day of new augmentation over the next 6 years across groundwater abstraction, water reuse, and permanent desal, which will make us increasingly resilient to future extreme drought events. And our goal is to be water resilient by 2030. Our next goal is to be water sensitive by 2040, taking a more holistic view to the complete water cycle. And that means really getting to grips with the state of our waterways in the city, as well as those urban environments around our waterways. And the water resilience framework and approach found us quite strong on things like strategy and leadership and engineering, procurement, contract management. But one of the areas that it found us relatively weak on was on water and healthy urban spaces and on the natural environment. And we're a city with a large informal sector, and we have significant pollution issues in our 21 rivers and catchments in the city. And so we were able to affirm that with our many stakeholders and to be able to start co-designing those responses. And indeed, as I said, the strategic response now is to be a water sensitive city by 2040. And at the current point in time, we're doing our 20-year master planning, which is starting to work out what it means to be a water sensitive city and what that journey will look like, first in the early years, and then as we increase a greater level of maturity. I think that the water resilience framework and approach is really, really useful. It is an excellent engagement tool. We regularly return to it now in the city of Cape Town. I have used it in a couple of team building and strategy meetings with water managers. So it is a good way to return to those key problems. And what I like about it as well is it allows for all the various intersections of water resilience in this biggest sense, to be looked at the same time. So many cities around the world focus very much on the engineering responses to water, but there are a lot of other parts of water around livability and economic opportunities and culture and spirituality, which often get forgotten. And so a tool like this brings it all together. I certainly encourage as many other cities in the world to deploy this tool. It is relatively straightforward to do. I think the insights will be really beneficial. Thank you. Back to the program director.
Thank you, Gareth. And just mention that Cape Town was one of the first cities that used this tool and has been a great inspiration, not only for our member cities of the Resilient Cities Network, but I think for a lot of cities across the globe. And also, Cape Town did this work a few years ago. This year, we initiated another program that is led by WRI. It is also under the Cities Action Track. And we have Jafet, the CRO from the city of Kigali, to talk about why is Kigali now participating in the urban water resilience program, and why actually Kigali is in the process of doing this kind of robust assessment and analysis of their water system. So Jafet, it's great to have you here with us. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Lina, and hi to everyone. Yeah, as Lina said, Kigali is ready to embark on the resilience assessment for its water system. And I want to tell you a little bit of Kigali and of the water challenges that Kigali is facing that is needing this assessment to go forward. Kigali is the capital city and the economic engine of Rwanda. Its current population is estimated at 1.6 million, but projected to more than double in 2050. Kigali is currently hosting half of the country's urban population, and this is growing very fast at a rate of 7.4, making it one of the fastest growing cities in Africa, if not in the world. And in regards to water supply, I can say that the city has an average supply rate of 57 liters per capita per day. And this has improved so much since the 2013 figure, which was 45 liters per day. And also, there has been a lot of achievement in terms of access to water, where we are counting 95% access to non-contaminated water sources. However, we do have many challenges despite these achievements. For instance, only 34% out of the 90% that has access, only 34% have access to piped water into their houses or compounds. You see that the percentage is still low. And also, while the capacity at source level is adequate, the current supply is lagging behind the actual demand, especially in terms of network reticulation, where there's a lack of pressure management. And I wish also to mention other challenges, which include the difficulties to expand the water network due to undulating terrain in Kigali and in the most of the country. And also, we do have like 73% of informal settlements, and it's difficult to upgrade the water network. This is also associated, or in addition to aging facilities, whereby many of them were laid down in the 70s and even before. So there is a need to really upgrade to pressure-resistant materials, and the need to ensure proper management of water losses and to reduce the amount of non-revenue water. We do also have other issues in the knowledge, especially there is a huge gap in the knowledge of our underground water resources. And this is affecting the borehole projects. Sometimes due to lack of this knowledge, the planning are not accurate, and some of these projects do fail. And the other big issues is the flooding, to which the city is very much vulnerable, and the pollution from stormwater runoff. So this leads to increase the water treatment costs, in some cases to failure of water infrastructure. So I can say that the city needs to reduce water shortage and to realize 24/7 water supply everywhere across the city. And this is why many projects are in the pipeline, like the Kigali bulk water project, which is to be completed this year. And it is going to produce 40 megaliters of clean water per day. And this is equivalent to 1/3 of Kigali's today's supply. In addition to this, that's why we opted to go for the city water resilience assessment, which we hope to also tackle some of the challenges that I mentioned earlier. So city water resilience assessment is one action listed in our resilience roadmap. And I believe that it will support the prioritization of the city actions that contribute enhancing the city adaptive capacity to impacts of the disasters and also the risks of climate change. In addition to ensuring a more inclusive and efficient of water supply and water management. We also expect that in the long run, the opportunities explored by the assessment will help us to achieve a resilient and stable water by minimizing the effects of various shocks that are currently affecting our water system. So this initiative is the first of our resilience roadmap to be implemented, and it will help to give visibility to the resilience program in Kigali, and also to the resilience concept, which is relatively new in Rwanda. The city is very much honored to be part of this partnership and part of this cohort of cities that are pioneering this work in Africa. And we are hoping to learn a lot from cities like Cape Town that took this journey before us. And I think, as Gareth presented, the city of Cape Town has achieved a lot since they took this assessment. We are hoping to learn from Cape Town and other cities, and also being part of this multi-city platform will help us to build required synergies for tackling water challenges, which most of the time are similar in many cities, and which in some cases they have this transboundary nature. So we are looking to leverage on the city water resilience assessment tool and to improve the resilience to many of the shocks to our water system. Thank you very much for the floor, Lina.
Thank you, Japhet. And we're really looking forward to hearing the progress of Kigali within all of this project. And I think we will have more opportunities in the next year to follow your journey and the journey of the other almost 3 or 6 cities, if I'm not wrong, Katrin, that are part of this program. So there is a question for Gareth and Jafet, and I think maybe Gareth, since you've implemented the resilience framework, you are more capable of responding to that. So the question here is how, through the application of the CWRA, you took into consideration the role of water within the food, energy, water nexus, and whether you had to actually plan or create new governance structures and shifts to respond to that.
Thanks very much. It's a superb question. Yeah, and interesting, actually enough, the City Water Resilience Framework approach will give you a way to think about this in the context of an individual urban environment. There are some particular measurables around engagement and who is at the table and those kinds of questions. Let me just, I mean, Cape Town is by no means the perfect example of this, so I'm not going to even pretend that we are. But I would maybe like to reflect a little bit around evolution of this area, around joint planning and multiple voices. So I think I mentioned in my presentation that, you know, like many big metropolitan cities, Cape Town is a heavily engineered city, and our water utility, which is inside of our city government, has come through that particular evolution around technical solutions. And, you know, I'm not saying that that is necessarily a bad thing, but the drought heavily disrupted that, and we became massively vulnerable, and we learned very, very quickly under extreme disruption that the city government was not the savior of Cape Town in that particular moment. It genuinely required a partnership, and I know that word is used often, but it required a partnership between Cape Townians, our citizens, and the government and businesses and everyone at that particular point in time. And it was remarkable, and I'm glad that we did it. We did make ourselves very vulnerable, and here I'm talking about reaching out for assistance. And there are actually many people in this call who helped in many ways. And so just to give you a few examples, we, as the city government, we opened our doors to academics, for example, at a rapid rate. Many of those relationships have matured significantly. Our research partnerships are excellent now in the city of Cape Town. We formed, and this is possibly my best example of what we've done, which others may like to replicate, is we formed a water resilience advisory committee, which I am the program manager for, which has now been running since August 2017, and has met initially once every month and now every 2 months. And on that committee are city councillors, members of business, members of academia from our 4 universities, NGOs, in our case, it's like the WWF are on it, sector development agencies, so areas that are particularly economic focus, organized agriculture, to name but a few. And that is an opportunity where we, as the city government, present ideas and work and achievements and, you know, problems, and those are critiqued in a way that is open to the public at any particular point in time. And then similarly, those members are able to present work back at us, academic work, things that we need to think about, problems. And so we've institutionalized that in law in the city of Cape Town. And it, as I said, has been running for a long time and works very well. During the drought, those discussions were robust and sometimes very difficult. And I've seen the evolution of that now over many years. And those partnership in that committee is a lot stronger now. And I've also seen the evolution of ideas. So it's not just about engineering anymore. It's about improved service delivery in our informal settlements, for example, the water quality issues. So that's one way I can give you as an example. I'm not saying we're perfect. We need to do a lot more on general engagement, but we know we need to do that, and we really are trying different ways to improve data gathering and co-own data with communities. But a lot of that is in pilot stage. We hope to get better, and I hope my answer helps somewhat. Thank you.
Thank you, Gareth. And there are more questions here, so I urge you to continue the discussion also in the chat, because we need to move forward. And I would like to invite Claire Jochen from Deltares. Claire is based in Florida in the US to talk about how we can implement innovative resilience and adaptation planning solutions, and what are some interesting projects that you've done over there. So Claire, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Lena. I'm glad and happy to share some recent experience on innovative planning solutions in the US. And I would like to highlight, let me see, 3 different projects on innovative approaches to increase resilience and reduce flood risks. The first one is about the dynamic adaptive policy pathways as a generic approach to planning. The second one is on a community-oriented flood resilience support system that we're currently developing to support communities in their planning efforts. And the third one is on including cascading impacts of critical infrastructure failure during flood events. So the focus of my talk is not so much on water scarcity, though that is also important, but on reducing flood risk now and in the future. The Dynamic Adaptive Policy Pathways, or DAP, as it is usually called, is one of the 5 methods to decision-making under uncertainty and deep uncertainty. A key feature of this approach which differentiates it from other approaches is that it explicitly acknowledges that decision-making is made over time and that decisions should not be considered independently. Adaptation is a path. The endpoint is based on what we currently know and anticipate, but also on what we will learn, experience, and decide in the future. DAP helps to identify the no-regret short-term actions and the longer-term options to achieve the flood reduction goals. The result is typically a pathway map, showing all these decisions options over time. The method has been developed in the Netherlands and is now used more and more worldwide. And that brings me to the example of Florida. We applied that approach for a study of the C7 basin in Miami-Dade County. And the goal was to provide input for the local mitigation strategy in response to sea level rise, but also to show the use and application of the DAP for the region. This is the result of the project. It shows the pathway map, and you should think of it as a transit map, showing how to navigate into the future while maintaining the flood risk objectives. In this specific case, the objective was that flood risk should not increase with sea level rise, or in other words, things shouldn't get worse. While the vertical axis here shows the transit lines, or the interventions or measures that have been assessed. And in this particular case, we had 2 different types of measures. On the top, you see structural measures consisting of local and regional flood mitigation. And at the bottom of the transit line axis, you see land use measures. And in this study, we considered raising buildings and roads to different types of elevations, ranging from 6, 7, up to 8 feet even. And what is an important feature of this pathway map is that this small black line represents the terminal, the end terminal of the transit line. And in terms of measures, it is referred to as the adaptation tipping point. It basically indicates at what sea level rise, shown on the x-axis, the measure no longer meets the objective. Well, how does an adaptation pathway in such a pathway map look like? Well, you could, for instance, start with regional flood mitigation by installing a pump at the tidal barrier. But you will see in this map that at a sea level rise of about 0.2 feet, the measure will no longer meet the flood risk reduction objective. You have to start augmenting this solution with, for instance, local flood mitigation measures by implementing flood protection structures along the canals, or installing local pumps or flap gates or exfiltration trenches. And this combined set of measures will take you up to about 0.7 feet of sea level rise to achieve your flood risk reduction objectives. And this threshold basically gives you time to implement the more difficult measures like raising buildings and roads. These measures are expensive, have a lot of societal impacts, but by implementing the structural measures first, you buy yourself some time to start and prepare the implementation of the more difficult solutions that really bring you way further into the future, up to sea level rises of 2.5 feet. The result is a robust and adaptive plan to achieve your objectives into the future. The preferred pathway, and this is just an example, is usually determined with additional criteria and a lot of stakeholder involvement. Criteria include, of course, cost, benefits, but also implementation time. The tipping points of the measures are based on a lot of analysis, including flood risk modeling, flood modeling, damage modeling, scenario analysis, and risk assessment, and of course, a lot of stakeholder engagement. And to support these planning efforts, communities need a fast, user-friendly tool to support them in achieving the required information and planning for the future. And this brings me to the second project. We're currently developing a community-oriented flood resilience support system for the Department of Homeland Security. And this system will help communities in different ways. It consists of a computational heart, and this computational engine of the system consists of a fast hazard model that helps to assess the impacts and the flood hazards in areas. Then the second module of the computational heart consists of a damage model to assess the impacts to properties of a community. And the user interface is a user-friendly interface that helps the user to set up and run simulations, but it also manages the scenarios that you need to analyze. And a scenario is here defined as an event, a projection, and a strategy combined into one. So for example, if you would, a scenario could be the event of Hurricane Irma combined with a sea level rise of 0.5 feet and a strategy like implementing a pump at the tidal sea gate of a canal. The computational heart can run in different ways. It can be used to analyze single events, but it can also be used to analyze, to perform a complete risk assessment. But there's a lot of information and metrics. And in addition to this computational heart, we will also develop a web viewer to translate the enormous amount of information in tangible metrics and information that matters to decision makers. So the web viewer will help answer questions like how effective a certain measure is, where flood risks are highest, and what, for instance, would happen if we not only had a storm surge, but also a huge rain event, which is typical for compound flooding events. The project started last summer. The development of the system will be finished next summer. And then we'll start the validation of the system for 3 geographical locations in the US and demonstrate the whole system with Charleston in South Carolina as the pilot community. I should have included Charleston in the logo bar at the bottom here as well, but then I would have had to add 40 more logos and that just wouldn't fit. There's, however, one item that we should also include when planning for climate resilience and adaptation that needs attention. This is a satellite video of after Hurricane Irma, and it shows Florida here in the dark. You can see massive power outages happening during and after Irma. And these power outages cause many cascading impacts to other critical infrastructure systems, and thereby severely disrupting society. If we want to plan to increase resilience and enhancing the resilience of communities, we need to develop methods that also include the cascading impacts that result from outages of critical infrastructures during events. And that brings me to my last slide and the last project that I briefly want to discuss about. We are working on this together with Broward County and other local partners to develop a method that can account for these cascading impacts in the resilience planning efforts. The first project that we executed focused more on identifying the vulnerabilities of the critical infrastructure networks in Broward County and establishing how the relationships between critical infrastructures actually look like. We use the circle approach that we developed over the past few years to do this project. And it basically consists of three main components. The first one was an effort of data collection, not only on what critical infrastructure is where, but also to do flood hazard mapping. So flood scenario analysis were performed by Broward County, and this information was brought into what we call a circle workshop, where together with stakeholders and operators basically of critical infrastructure systems, we had a workshop to exchange knowledge and experience with critical infrastructure failing during flood events. And the result of such a workshop is captured in this circle diagram at the top. And what it does, it visualizes basically all the relationships between the different types of critical infrastructure systems in Broward County. And it not only visualizes these, all the information that is exchanged by the operators is also captured with this stakeholder engagement tool. Based on the results of the workshop and the flood scenarios, we were able to visualize and evaluate the cascading impacts. And that really contributed to raising awareness for this phenomenon that is so essential when you want to increase resilience of communities to floods. So we're currently working on a second follow-up project, and where the first one was more of raising awareness and making the cascading impacts visible and tangible for everybody. The second project focuses on quantifying the indirect economic impacts of these cascading impacts and to develop a generic method. The method that we will develop, that we're developing, will be, of course, applied to Broward County, but it is generic and it can be used to expand to traditional risk assessment frameworks. And that, in the end, will contribute to our end goal, improved planning and enhanced community resilience to floods. So innovative planning solutions are at your fingertip and are freely available. I thank you for your attention, and happy to take any questions or answers. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. And there are a couple of questions. I want to combine actually a couple. What is the replicability of this kind of solutions, especially in, let's say, regions that are different than the US? What is also based on your experience, the enabling factors? And what is the enabling environment that you need in order to develop that, whether this is at the government level or at the community level. So what has been your experience so far?
Well, essential in any adaptation planning effort is collaboration at all levels. In these projects too, you need to work with local and federal government together. Stakeholders need to be engaged, and also, of course, the community. And that's something that we really are planning for in the project with the new tool development, but also in the other two projects, local stakeholders were engaged from the start until the end. And that helps to make this next step towards implementation. The example that I showed for in the first slide for South Florida, Miami-Dade County, currently the local government is pursuing implementation of, and the next phase of implementation of these pathways by requesting funding to get the projects implemented. What we often see is that hydraulic measures will help to reduce flood risk to reduce flood risk, but that in the end, you need more difficult solutions like raising of buildings and roads. But the hydraulic measures will buy you time to prepare for these measures and to implement them as the future unfolds.
Got it, thank you. There are a couple of other questions for you also in the chat, so I urge you to look at them and maybe respond offline. I would like to go to my friend Kamlesh Yagnik, the CRO from the city of Surat. Kamlesh, the Surat and Rotterdam partnership and relationship has been, I mean, it started, I don't know, back in 2016, if I'm not wrong, during a 100 RC knowledge exchange. But from then until now, there's been a lot going on. And we would love to hear the trajectory of this relationship and what was the value that came out of this partnership. So, Kamlesh.
Okay, yeah. Thank you, Lina, and good evening, good morning to everyone. I'm Kamlesh Yagnik from city of Surat, which is situated in the Western India, and it's a delta city. A river is passing through the city, a city having area of about 326 square kilometer area, and the population is 10 times bigger than Rotterdam. Rotterdam having a same area, but the population is close to about 600,000, while we are almost 6 million people. Now, despite having this disparity, we have had a very beautiful relationship with regard to water resilience. And in next, like 6 to 7 minutes, I'll be restricting essentially between, my talk essentially, like on a partnership between Surat and Rotterdam, and more especially, what Surat has learned out of this partnership. Now, in a nutshell, if I have to say in one line, we have been living away from water. We have been going away from the water. And now, like after learning experiences from Rotterdam, we know how to live with water. So this is a journey, like going away or running away from water to live with the water. That is actually the outcome of a relationship between Rotterdam and Surat. Now, Surat in last 2 decades, we have had a notable change. So we can, like say that, yes, a climate change is impacting the city, and flood is a major challenge. Flood coming, water coming from the catchment area about 1,000 kilometers away from our city, and city gets inundated, once the water reaches to the sea. This is a major problem. And in 2006, we had a historic flood. And this flood made us realize that something is needed to be done downstream. Something happens at the upstream and the city gets damaged, city gets flooded. So what can be done? And we were looking for solutions. Now, 100 Resilient Cities program, gave us an opportunity to visit Rotterdam. And while in Rotterdam, there are 3 things, which clearly struck us. These three things, which we were looking for. One, is their green, yellow, blue policy, the green roof, yellow roof, and blue roof policy of Rotterdam, which really helped us, and that really attracted Surat Municipal Corporation, that we should do something in this regard. Secondly, in order to because flood is a major problem. In last 20 years, we've had notable 6 floods. So how do we minimize the impact of this flood? So we devised our end-to-end early warning system, and we did get a lot of inputs from Rotterdam and other Dutch company, including Deltares. We got a lot of inputs in designing our end-to-end system. And thirdly is a water plaza. Now, these three things, these three projects, which we can very clearly say that it's an outcome of our relationship with Rotterdam. Now, the green, yellow, blue roof, that water recharging policy, we never had it. Now, this policy, we could implement it. And today, Surat Municipal Corporations have designated one town planning scheme. It's a small area of about 2 square kilometer, 2 to 2.5 square kilometer area, where we are going to go for 100% capturing of rainwater. So this is basically an outcome of this relationship. Secondly, we have this end-to-end early warning system, which I talked about. It's basically a hydrological and hydraulic modeling of the entire system, starting from forecasting, which we get it from our meteorological department, to the actual precipitation, we get it. Based on this electronic model is designed, which tells us. So the respite time has increased. Earlier, whenever we used to get a flood, and if we are releasing the water from the dam, the respite time was, let's say, 6 to 7 hours. Now, with this early warning system in place, we get a higher respite time to the tune of around, 24 to 36 hours. So that's a great saving. And Surat is a city where a lot of textile and diamond industries, they are situated on the bank of river. So it really helps them, taking away their machineries, and appropriate warning can be given so that loss gets minimized. In 2007, the loss was to the tune of around 2.1 billion. And now, the same quantity of water, even if it is released, the loss is almost minimal. And this particular end-to-end early warning system works well. But then, we had another problem, especially in the city of City. And how did we overcome? That's a third project, which we learned. And that's a flagship project as far as Surat is concerned, and that's Water Plaza. Now, what did we do, and what are the main challenges, which we had? Number one, the groundwater replenishment, because the industries would draw a lot of water from the ground. So that was a major challenge. And in India, there is a particular religious festival. And this religious festival demands that the idols are created, and these idols are to be submerged at the end of the festivities. They are to be submerged in the sea or in any water bodies. And then, rainwater harvesting was a challenge. And as people draw water from the ground, salinity intrusion is a major problem. And because it is a crowded place, how do we ensure and how do we give recreational and playground facility to the locals? So this was a major challenge. Again, social cohesion was a big challenge. And then, because of, as I said, it's a very compact and dense city. So because of that, it's a jungle of cement. So, urban heat island is a major challenge. So how do we mitigate and ensure that, we have an urban cooling? And then at the same time, we do use close to about 1.2 billion liter every day. Our average consumption of water because of industry, it is much higher than the Indian average. We almost consume about 190 liters of water per person a day. So again, how do we ensure that appropriate sewage treatment plants are also available? So in order to, get rid of, in order to find solutions to all these problems, once we visited the Water Plaza in Rotterdam, we thought, yes, this is a water plaza which would help us mitigating all these challenges, which I just narrated. And based on the design, because we could borrow the concept, we could get the idea, but ultimately based on our we design our own water plaza after visiting in Rotterdam, corporations, people, engineers from Rotterdam, they supported us and they visited Surat, and hence is one of them who can vouch for it. And this particular water plaza now is designed, and we are in a phase of implementing it. The design is ready, the site is identified, the project report is ready, and this is one of because this is one of the 8 water plazas which are planned by this in this partnership. And this is going to be close to about 10,000 square kilometer, 10,000 square meter area of the water plaza, which will cater to almost about 0.5% of total population. Close to about 35,000 people will get benefit out of this water plaza, and which covers almost about 0.30% of the city. And after seeing the success of this, local municipal corporations, they have identified various, many such water plazas in other part of the cities as well. And this partnership, which really worked not only in identifying the problem and its solutions, it actually helped us in providing a support, like a financial support also. Now today, Surat and Rotterdam, they are also connected under one European Union program of International Urban Cooperation Program. And through this program, we are now negotiating with certain international funding agency who are providing us a funding with regard to this particular project and with regard to subsequent projects. But in the meantime, the first pilot project, which we think sometime like middle of next year, it should be ready. And essentially what we wanted was a customized design of water plaza, considering Surat context, the water management and community participations. So this is basically a great partnership, like which has evolved over a period, as Lina said, which has evolved and to a greater extent now matured. And Rotterdam, they are the water people, and a great learning till now has taken place. So this is like in nutshell with regard to water plaza. But then like there are other challenges, and those challenges are also, we are looking forward to companies from Rotterdam to support us, especially in measuring online in a real-time basis of water quality of our Tapi River. So there are solutions which available, which will monitor pH, TDS, BOD, COD. All these parameters will be measured. And Rotterdam, actually, the companies in Rotterdam, they are supporting us in managing this. So this is, like essentially in the nutshell, I wanted to share what has happened between Rotterdam and Surat in last over 5 years. So at this point, I'll stop here, and if there are any questions or any suggestions, I'll be more than happy to accept them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kamlesh. And exactly this kind of partnerships and projects, we want to scale them up, accelerate, multiply through this global community. And just to mention that the Surat Rotterdam project under the international cooperation is considered one of the best projects of its kind. So, and I think it has to do with this kind of strong connection, in the multi-level strong connection that you had with Rotterdam. So quickly, what would be the main, let's say, elements that you think could make this kind of partnership successful? What kind of support do cities need in this kind of peer-to-peer connection?
See, number one, like the local government, that's very, very important. Although in last 5 years, unlike European cities, we have a dual authority in our cities. We have a commissioner as well as mayor. And there's always, you find a transition taking place. Like either the term of mayor gets over or the term of commissioner. Commissioner generally is the administrative head. So how do we ensure, this transition? Because that's a big challenge. And people of Surat, because of the tradition, which is established over the years, this kind of tradition, we could this kind of transition, we could overcome. So because the community is so strong and the local government work very actively with community. So unless, we have, a strong community participation in such projects, this kind of projects can never take place, especially the partnership between cities of this kind, like it's very, very difficult. And same, I believe, like is true for Rotterdam.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Kamlesh, and thank you all for sharing. Sorry, thank you all for sharing your experiences. Yes, can you hear me now? Yeah, sorry. Good. So we are moving on to our next session, which, I mean, we've heard from cities, and there are multiple other great examples out there. So this was just a small selection. I want to invite our next speakers, my colleague, Katrien Brubach, Global Director for Programs, Innovation and Impact for the Resilient Cities Network. But beyond her title, deep down, she's the water and sanitation expert. I think with this hat, she's participating in this panel. Hans Harris, expert advisor, urban water management from Deltares, and a longtime friend of our network. And Joop Verhagen, lead water at the Global Center on Adaptation. Joop is a recent friend, but I think that this kind of collaboration will stick for years to come. So I want to ask all three of you, and maybe Katrien and Hans, you can start. Why do we need to create this kind of global community for water in cities? What are we trying to solve, and why do you think that Deltares, Resilient Cities, and the center is, the right kind of the host for this kind of work? So, Katrien.
Thank you. Thank you, Lina. Thank you, Lina, for inviting us to speak. And thank you so much to all these amazing city speakers presenting us with the city perspective, and Claire also with the water expert perspective. And I guess that is one of the main reasons we are here. And thank you so much for giving me my water title back, because I guess I'm a hybrid. I have to present a resilience perspective, but I also hope that I'm still perceived as a water and Joop, for you as well as sanitation person in this conversation. We have to bring cities and experts together. So, and I think this is one big thing. So it's about partnerships. It's about understanding challenges on each side. And from the work I have had the chance to do over the last years, it's pretty clear that resilience is about water, and it's not only about building capacity to respond to water-related shocks and stresses. No, it's also to build resilience through water, and that is what we are learning. And I'm very upset to say that from the Dutch, because I had hoped that the Germans would do more progress on that, but definitely I have to say the Dutch did a very good work on that. So we have to think about how do we build resilience through water, and how do we navigate a changing climate and an uncertain future. And we heard about that around this, a major aspect is how do cities plan, and how can we help cities to plan in a better way. And I think this then goes back also to the resilience perspective, and that's something which is, I guess, very close to my heart, and I know it's also very close to Hans's heart, although he's a much deeper water expert than I will ever be. And that means that water experts have actually failed to solve the water crisis. And the big question is, why? Why have we actually failed? Climate is changing and the challenges are increasing, but we still have we still have so many problems that people do not have access. We have more than 800 million people living in informal settlements who have no access to basic services. And the question is, why haven't we been able to solve these problems? Although we have all these amazing tools Claire presented. And I think this is something which we learned, and I think Gareth presented on that, and Jeffy presented on that, and that's what we learned. When we talk about resilience, we recognize that shocks and stresses are interconnected, and that cities in itself, they are not only solving water issues, they are solving inequality issues, they are solving electricity and energy issues, they are solving food issues, they are solving housing issues. They do not or can't only focus on water. They have to focus on everything, and they have to prioritize. And I think this is where, for me, resilience come in, and these partnerships come in, is that shocks and stresses are interconnected. So climate change is not happening in a bubble. So, and when we try to solve for a single challenge like flooding or drought or so on, we will not actually be able to keep path with the growth that is happening around the world, especially in cities. And we will most probably push our cities into bankruptcy because they only have limited funds. So thinking about building resilience through water and with water and changing relationships, for me, is very much to finding solutions and responses that have multiple benefits, and that require cities to gain a better understanding on these challenges and how to recognize how they're interconnected, and to seek to solve holistically. And that's where the partnerships coming in. It's not about water people working with water people. You also need the sanitation people, very important. And you also need the housing people and anybody on the table to actually find these solutions. And it's important that city governments, and I'm moving now onto the other side again, that city governments recognize, and Gareth made it very, very clear, and I just saw that Jaffe also put it into the chat. Cities need to work with technical experts like us, and like most of these attendees here in this webinar, but they also need to work with the communities. They need to work with the businesses. They need to work with the single households, because when we are at home adapting to climate change and water-related shocks and stresses, if I'm in California or somewhere, I may have to decide, do I now sign up an insurance for flooding or for wildfires or for God knows what? So it's like we all have a role to play. And I think it's important to recognize that cities are very complex systems, and there are a lot of moving parts there and a lot of concentrated risks. And we have seen what Claire presented around compounding impacts. And this complexity makes them vulnerable, and therefore I think we have to work together, and yeah, so I guess I'm going to stop here, otherwise I'm going to talk for the next hour.
You sure can. So Hans, why? Yes. And why Deltares as well? Why yes. Are we doing this together?
Yes, Lina, thank you for giving me the floor and the opportunity to comment on this. And well, I couldn't agree more with Katrien. And Katrien started with saying that cities and experts needs to work together on solving these issues. So, and Henk started by stating that cities are the places where everything comes together, and not only environmental issues, but also social and economic issues come together. So those are also the places where we have to look at water issues, water challenges in relation to climate. Deltares, as a research institute, as a not-for-profit research institute, we work on water and subsurface and infrastructure challenges. That's our mission, that's our task, if you will. And it is our task to work on that, not only in the Netherlands, but globally. And we do realize very strongly that we cannot sit in our ivory tower and think of beautiful solutions. We are not an academic institution. We are an institution that has the task to produce applied research and solutions, and to collaborate and co-create solutions with stakeholders, institutional stakeholders like cities and governments and nations, but also with communities and people. And well, over the years, we have come to work with 100 resilient cities, and now the Resilient Cities Network as a fantastic partner globally in cities. And we have worked in projects in which we managed to reach out to those cities and citizens and communities. And within these cities, we managed to develop solutions together. So it's not only Deltares developing something and then coming outside and try and demonstrate these solutions, but it's also, like Claire very clearly demonstrated, we develop solutions within cities by learning and understanding in these cities what the challenges are. And that's essential for us as an organization. And given the challenges that we face on water and climate issues, this is the way we think we can well, move on and try to scale up solutions that are so needed. Back to you, Lina.
Thank you, Hans. Joep, how is all of this connected with the big, ambitious objectives of the water action track and the Commission work? How do you see this connection, and how, in the same way, what can the center offer the cities, and how can we create this kind of symbiotic relationship?
Thank you, Lina. Thank you as a new friend. Thank you very much. Let me first thank all the presenters from the cities and other presenters, because I thought the stories were absolutely fascinating. And I think my takeaways is that, like, you know, exactly as Katrien said, water is everywhere, it's nowhere, but we cannot solve it alone as a water sector. It's all about developing and building horizontal and vertical partnerships. I think what we need to realize, at least, that within this room, we are all convinced water is important. That we need to adapt to a changing climate, that we need to factor in risk if we talk about climate risk, if we talk about the future, that we need to develop and test and apply approaches that help us to deal with uncertainty. But we are, in that way, also a bit of a bubble. Because this is not, if you look at climate risks are not factored in if financial institutions make decisions. Climate risk is not, I mean, look at the Netherlands. People say the Netherlands, Katrien, thank you for your compliment. We thought we had it all done and sorted out, right? And now it appears that the Netherlands is very prone to droughts rather than to flooding. And we are just getting to terms with that actually drought is going to be, or might be, a recurring issue in the next decades to come. So what the Commission was set up to, and what the Global Center tries to continue, is actually to draw attention to the need to adapt to a changing climate. And what we do on the ground is, like, you know, I was challenged by, you said 66 million people in Surat, and I was surprised, because when I was last in Surat, I think it was 1/3 of that. There are so many cities beyond the Resilient City Network. There are 100 cities in Africa with more than 500,000 people, if I got the numbers right. And we try to actually link more and more cities, more and more different partners to each other, to new knowledge, new insights, but also try to develop linkages between cities and national governments with the African Development Bank, for instance. So we try to be a kind of solutions broker and try to make sure that cities, as the engines of economic growth, 80% of global GDP is generated in cities, that we connect them to financial institutions to make sure that actually cities can develop but also implement adaptation plans. I'll leave it there. I'll be very happy to answer any questions, but I also like, to leave a bit of space for other questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And I wanna go towards a more practical kind of approach. So For whom is this community for? What are the type of activities, or what is the outcome? What do we expect? What is the impact that we want to see through this? And how can somebody actually that is interested can join? So who wants to start?
Let me kick.
You. Yes,
yeah, let me just kick off, and then I just kick the ball, kick the can down the road, either to Hans or Katrien. So for us, I mean, like if you look at the Water Adaptation Hub, actually it's a place where inspiration, knowledge, commitment can be exchanged, where people kind of find a space to, with like-minded people, or maybe even more importantly, with people who are not like-minded, to exchange ideas, knowledge, to work on certain solutions. But what we think is important as well, and that's why we think the facilitator is so important, that we actually connect the water adaptation dialogue, because our water dialogues are very disconnected from the climate dialogues. And that's what we try to do as well, by kind of summarizing discussions, putting them into the policy channel, and actually make the link between the water and climate dialogue, because we are not there as yet. I mean, in the NDCs, 75% of the commitments in the NDCs are linked to water somehow, one way or the other. But water doesn't really figure in the COPs, right? I mean, that's, but let me kind of give the floor either to Hans or Katrien.
So I guess we are here to make friends, yeah? So we are, like Hans and I are friends, and Job is a new friend, and a lot of the people I'm looking at the moment, they are true friends, and they became friends over the last couple of years in the journey we started. And there are a lot of more friends I have seen in the N10D list. And I think this is what the community is about. It's about creating partnerships and friendships and solving complex issues together. And like Job was saying, bringing different people together, different views, different kind of perspectives, different approaches, different tools, being open to any kind of comment and suggestion, as well as input, and trying to do that from a water perspective, but now also from a city perspective, because at the end of the day, a lot of climate adaptation action needs to happen in cities. So as long as we are just talking with each other, nothing is going to happen. So we need to bring cities into this conversation, and we need to understand that we need people who are not only talking about infrastructure and technologies and smart. We need people who talk about equality, about social inclusion, about economic justice, about human rights, about being smart, being resilient, and helping us to identify these priorities that we have to decide upon in a city environment. And so I guess what we need to do is we need to spread the word, it's late on this side, but we need to spread the word and invite everybody to join us. And I think at the end of the day, we need to transform cities, and to transform cities, we need to come together, and then we will transform cities to adapt to climate change, to solve water, and yeah, we need any hand on deck, so everybody is welcome.
So Lina, to make it, perhaps you were asking to make it very practical, and just to try to do so. So indeed, we are committed. So that's Resilient Cities Network and GCA and Deltares. We are committed to make this work, which means that we can convene, we can bring in examples, we can bring cities and people together to discuss and to exchange. And today's session was a very good example of that. So that's absolutely something we intend to continue. And in addition, we also have the ambition to extend activities not only from webinars, but also to actual actions within cities, or perhaps learn from the exchange what new things we need to develop So in that sense, it will go back to the drawing board, so to say, to the design labs, to further develop the tools, learning from what we see in the exchanges within cities. And furthermore, it will greatly depend upon the engagement that we will receive from other partners of the Water Action Track and other cities. So the more the merrier, I would say, and the more partners, the more experts, the more city representatives will join this endeavor, the more capacity we will have to really put this into place and to make this work.
Yeah, and not only capacity, I'm sorry if I'm cutting, it's about knowledge and it's about learning. So it's about an exchange where even Hans, who is an expert, learns how to do things differently and how cities learn. And I think this is very important.
So,
sorry, Hans, go on.
Sorry, please, Lina, go ahead.
No, please.
No, I was just going back to you.
So I think this is clear, and I know that this is the beginning, and this will actually kickstart after the Climate Adaptation Summit, which is on the 25th of January. So I also think that this session, in a sense, is like the intro to the big milestone, which is the Climate Adaptation Summit. And then from then on, I think our ambition is that we will have a program of activities to actually kickstart this relationship. And I just want to understand also, maybe Hans, you are the better to respond to that. What is the role of innovation for this group, and how important is innovation? Or this will be more knowledge sharing among the practitioners?
That's a good question. So innovation is a word that makes a lot of people a little bit nervous. So perhaps you could specify it in developing new things, you could specify it perhaps in applied research, sharing, learning, and training. Ideally, this community of practice would feed into all of those aspects. And if we are really capable of developing new things, making these new things really work within the context of cities, and share those examples with more cities, that could be called innovation. So, and we need that process because, like Joep was explaining, the goal of the big hairy goal of the GCA is to really accelerate adaptation. And what we see now, acceleration is lacking, because of many reasons. But one reason is that we still haven't figured out how to move good examples from one city to another quickly enough to reach out to thousands of cities by 2030. And that's what we need. And therefore we also need new solutions or better solutions.
Thank you, Hans. And I think this was a great kind of closing sentence. Unfortunately, we don't have more time. I wish we had, hours to further discuss it, and I'm sure we will. I want to thank you all for joining, all the speakers for taking the time. Again, this is the beginning. I've shared in the chat box an email that if you are interested in learning more about this, participating, if you have suggestions, if you're doing something very interesting and innovative that you want to share with others, please reach out to us, and we will continue this discussion as we move forward. So thank you all, and have a good rest of the day.